When we think about employer branding, two of the main metrics that we hold are an organization's cost per hire and an organization's time to hire. These are broad-based indicators that take into account many areas of your organization's employer brand. It also takes into account certain efficiencies in process. And one of the great barriers to a great cost per hire and time to hire is typically your hiring process. Taking a look at from the moment a candidate applies to a position through to when they get a job offer up until maybe the point of onboarding. Is that process both on brand? Does it speak well to the candidate experience? And is it efficient? And does it speak to what your organization needs from a development standpoint? And so hiring process engineering is one of those areas that organizations typically overlook when it comes to developing an employer brand of any significance. And that's because it's difficult. There's so many steps along the way, and it's easy to think, okay, this small thing such as an invitation email isn't meaningful in the grand scheme of things. But one of the big areas that contributes to how your hiring process is perceived is that candidate experience. And that candidate experience is so important. It's pivotal when you think about it in the grand scheme of things of an employer brand. And so we like to look at a hiring process at each step of the equation. So right from the start, does your job description, for example, speak to the organization that you want to be? Does it match up to your employer value proposition? So looking at things like, does the language look like the organization you want to be? Are you a fun organization, but your job description speaks, to a very serious kind of tone? Those kind of inconsistencies not only slow your time to hire, but they increase your cost per hire as well, because you're having your hiring team go through far more resumes and applications than necessary, just because the first step of your hiring process is inefficient or it doesn't speak to the organization you want to be. And so we look at the hiring process along every single point of the conveyor belt, so to speak, and make sure that, one, it's on brand, and then it does what it needs to do from an efficiency standpoint. A very important area that I think organizations miss out on is the point where you have somebody sitting across the table from a candidate during the interview setting. Here's an area that is probably the first in-person engagement that a candidate has with your organization. And so that point person from your organization has to be very thoughtfully put and thoughtfully placed with brand codes and key ideas that they're armed with so that they speak positively to the organization. A lot of the candidate experience can be forgotten, your invitation emails, all those kind of things. If it isn't at the level that it needs to be, typically they can be forgotten with a great experience in the in-person interview setting. But organizations sometimes let that slip, in that the individual that sits across the table from a candidate doesn't even speak to the values or the brand codes or the value proposition that your organization wants to be. If you want to be, for example, a serious professional setting, and you want to portray that all throughout your hiring process, and the person sitting across the table at that first encounter with your organization is a little bit too laid back, or they're not wearing the right clothes, or they're not speaking in the right tone, it ruins the entire perception of the organization at a very pivotal point. And so what we're able to do with our hiring process engineering is take a look at your organization from a holistic standpoint and say, okay, here are the areas that are absolutely pivotal to get right because of certain factors, like this is where the candidate first experiences the organization in person, or this is where the first conversation happens. And we make sure that all those areas are on brand. And then typically what happens is if you start to tackle each step of the way and you make it process-based and on brand, over a long enough time horizon, you'll lower your cost per hire, which lowers hiring costs generally, which is great for your balance sheet. And it also helps your time to hire too. So you're able to get talent in faster and get them onboarded faster as well. So hiring process engineering is one of those things that is crucial to get right when you're thinking about making sure that your employer brand is best in class, best in your industry. because it informs so many areas of your candidate experience and then eventually your employee experience, and your overall employer brand.